A state nurse was threatened with towing by two fake HOA enforcers while helping a disabled resident on a public street. These men, booted from the HOA for harassment, thought no one would dare challenge their made-up authority. But Megan Hill wasn't just a nurse. She was a state health inspector with the law on her side. Just wait until you hear how the handcuffs ended up on the wrong wrists and why justice didn't just strike, it set a new rule for the whole town. It started like any other quiet Tuesday morning on Magnolia Drive. Walter Maddox sat on his shaded front porch, blanket over his legs, and a half-empty mug of instant coffee cooling on the armrest. After decades of welding in steel mills across the Midwest, his body had finally tapped out. 3 back surgeries in 6 years, 2 titanium rods, and now a slow, frustrating recovery that kept him mostly homebound. He wasn't a man who liked needing help, but he'd learned to be grateful for Nurse Megan Hill. Right on time, her dusty silver Honda Civic turned the corner and rolled to a stop along the curb in front of his walkway. She was like clockwork, state-assigned, razor-sharp, and kind without ever being pitying. The kind of nurse who could wrap your ribs and argue Medicare codes at the same time. Walter trusted her. But that morning, something strange happened before she could even lock her car. 2 men stepped into the sidewalk, mid-40s, both wearing dark windbreakers with a generic-looking HOA compliance unit patch stitched above the chest. Their movements were deliberate, almost rehearsed. One held a clipboard, the other held up what looked like a badge, laminated and curling at the edges. "You're parked in a restricted zone," the clipboard holder said before Megan could even say hello. "You'll need to move your vehicle immediately or be cited for noncompliance." Megan's brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, who are you with?" "Rosewood Gardens, HOA, Compliance Patrol." The taller one stepped forward. "You're on a private curb. Non-resident vehicles require a permit." Megan adjusted her bag on her shoulder and calmly unclipped her badge. "This is a public road. I'm with the Department of Health. I'm performing a scheduled visit with Mr. Maddox." The taller man didn't even glance at her credentials. "That doesn't matter. Your license plates aren't registered in our system, and you're interfering with neighborhood enforcement." From the porch, Walter stiffened in his chair. Interfering? Registered plates? He'd lived here since 2011. Not once in 12 years had he heard of an HOA compliance patrol, let alone one that patrolled public streets or ticketed healthcare workers. The real HOA barely managed to keep the community garden watered. He leaned forward, pain flaring in his spine. "What the hell is going on?" he called out. Neither man turned. The one with the clipboard was already peeling a bright orange sticker from a roll tucked under his arm, preparing to slap it across Megan's windshield. She stepped back, voice steady but sharper now. "You do not have the authority to ticket a government vehicle. Step away from the car." The man sneered. "Then call your supervisor, lady. But if this car's still here in 10 minutes, it's getting reported." Walter's mouth went dry. It wasn't just rude, it was wrong. A nurse helping a disabled man getting harassed in plain daylight, and no one was stopping them. He reached for his phone. Something about this smelled off. Worse than any HOA drama he'd seen before. Something was deeply, dangerously wrong. The sticker hit the windshield with a loud slap, its fluorescent orange surface almost glowing in the morning light. In bold black letters it read, "Non-compliant vehicle, subject to immediate tow." Walter's hands gripped the arms of his chair, his vision blurred with fury. "You're not authorized to do that!" he barked across the yard, his voice cracking with disbelief and pain. The man with the clipboard didn't flinch. Instead, he turned to face Walter with a smirk that felt rehearsed, like he'd been waiting for someone to challenge him all morning. "You signed the HOA covenant when you moved in, sir. This is private enforcement. We're just doing our job." Walter's stomach turned. He had signed the covenant, a standard one, over a decade ago. Lawn height restrictions, fence color codes, but never anything about public street jurisdiction, and definitely no roaming badge flashers trying to tow government vehicles. Megan took a single step forward, her face unreadable. "No," she said. "This is a public access street maintained by the county. You have no authority here, and you just vandalized a government-marked healthcare vehicle during an active home care visit." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. She pulled out her phone and calmly began recording, rotating it to landscape, focusing first on the sticker, then panning up to the two men. This is impersonation of code enforcement and interference with a state-regulated health service. The taller man shifted his weight, arms folding across his chest in a show of false confidence. "You're wasting your time. We've been doing this all week. Keeps the streets clean." There was a beat of silence. Then Megan smiled, but not the polite kind. It was tight, professional. The kind of smile you give someone who just handed you their entire confession on a silver platter. "Well, in that case," she said, keeping the camera steady, "you've just committed 7 consecutive days of impersonation, fraud, and obstruction. Each incident carries separate penalties under state and federal code. Congratulations." The words landed like bricks. The smirk faltered. Walter watched it happen, watched the shift in Megan's posture, the control, the certainty in her tone. She wasn't just pushing back, she was pressing charges, right there on the front lawn. The two men froze. The shorter one hesitated, glancing nervously at the phone's red recording light. You don't know what you're talking about." Megan's tone didn't budge. "I'm a state health inspector, level 9 VRI clearance. Your faces, your voices, your sticker, your fake badge, they're all documented now. Walk away. You have 20 seconds. And still, they didn't move. Walter, breath caught in his throat, realized something crucial. These weren't just overzealous HOA volunteers. They were bullies who had tasted power and were too arrogant to notice they'd just picked a fight with the wrong woman, on the wrong day, in front of the wrong witness. And they were about to learn what that mistake would cost them. Walter had lived through factory fires, blackouts, union strikes, and the slow dismantling of blue-collar America, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer audacity of what he was watching from his porch. 2 grown men, wearing knockoff jackets and dollar store badges, had just tried to ticket a government health worker like it was some kind of game. And now they stood defiantly on the sidewalk, as if they were the ones in control. But Megan didn't blink. With a surgeon's precision, she tapped out a message to the Department of Health's legal division. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need backup. She was the backup. Within minutes, she'd filed an incident report, uploaded video evidence, and flagged the encounter as an immediate threat to state-sanctioned health services. Walter, meanwhile, had called in his own reinforcements, his niece Rachel, who just happened to be a senior officer in the city's code compliance unit. The moment she heard fake enforcement and obstructing a state nurse, she promised she'd make a few calls. She did more than that. 40 minutes later, 2 marked police cruisers turned onto Magnolia Drive, lights flashing, but sirens silent, like sharks moving through shallow water. The street, normally quiet and calm, suddenly felt like a courtroom. But that wasn't all. A few minutes behind them came a sleek silver SUV bearing the official crest of the State Health Enforcement Bureau. The doors opened, and out stepped 2 agents in tailored jackets with real credentials. No curling laminate, no smug expressions, just quiet professionalism. Megan walked over, handed them her phone, and calmly recited her badge number, department ID, and summary of the incident. But she didn't stop there. She provided a list, meticulously kept, of every healthcare worker in the county who had reported being harassed, warned, or ticketed by HOA compliance officers, visiting nurses, elderly aides, Meals on Wheels volunteers. The officers listened. They didn't interrupt, and then they turned to the 2 imposters still standing by Megan's Civic. The taller one, perhaps sensing the tide turning, attempted one last bluff. "This is all a misunderstanding," he said, hands raised in theatrical innocence. "We're part of a neighborhood safety watch. We were just trying to help maintain order." Megan said nothing. Neither did Walter. The silence was louder than any accusation. The lead officer stepped forward, voice firm and measured. "Sir, impersonating a municipal code officer is a Class D criminal offense under Section 538.26. You issued fraudulent citations, interfered with a government worker, and falsely represented legal authority." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You are under arrest." The moment was surgical. One officer moved in from the left, the other from the right. The taller man tried to speak again, but the cuffs were already clicking behind his back. The shorter one went quietly, head bowed, every ounce of earlier smugness drained from his face. Walter didn't cheer. He didn't clap. He simply exhaled, slow and steady, as the patrol car doors closed. Because after everything, justice had finally arrived, and it hadn't needed theatrics, just the truth, and a camera. The aftermath wasn't quiet. It wasn't buried in paperwork or swept into a backroom settlement. It was loud, legal, and exactly what Walter Maddox had hoped for: public. Within 72 hours, the real story came out. The two men, Kyle Delaney and Roger Voss, were not just random residents playing dress-up with clipboards. They were disgraced former HOA board members, voted out 6 months earlier after a series of formal complaints from neighbors about intimidation tactics and misuse of community funds. They hadn't taken the loss gracefully. Instead of moving on, they created an unofficial compliance team, a vigilante HOA of 2. They printed their own warning labels, fabricated resident vehicle databases, and issued phony citations to anyone they didn't recognize. Their targets, mostly caregivers, mobile nurses, and elderly support staff. Anyone who didn't fit the neighborhood image. They labeled them outsiders. In reality, they were essential workers. The state wasn't amused. Following Megan's formal report and the evidence she provided, the Attorney General's office filed multiple felony charges: impersonation of a public official, falsifying legal documents, unlawful interference with state operations, and harassment under color of authority. The case made the evening news across 3 counties. But the part that mattered most to Walter wasn't the handcuffs or court dates. It was the response. Megan Hill received an official letter of commendation from the governor's office, recognizing her decisive and lawful defense of public health duties under targeted harassment. She didn't ask for the spotlight, but her actions triggered something bigger. Walter's niece Rachel worked with city council to draft a new ordinance, one that banned any unauthorized enforcement group or individual from operating within residential zones without verified municipal approval. No more fake patrols, no more weaponized clipboards. The ordinance passed in a unanimous vote. The HOA tried to spin it as an unfortunate misunderstanding, offering Walter a gift card and a formal apology. He sent it back with a handwritten note: "You don't resolve civil rights violations with coupons." And so, things changed. Megan still comes by every Tuesday, same civic, same firm stride, same dependable calm. But now, when she pulls up in front of Walter's house, there's a brand new sign installed at the curb, authorized by city council and paid for by public funds, reserved for licensed healthcare providers protected under state law. And underneath it, in bold lettering, violators will be prosecuted. Walter sometimes sits on his porch just to look at it, not because he needs the space, not even because he's waiting for trouble, but because it's proof. Proof that sometimes the system does listen, that sometimes the right person shows up at the wrong moment and refuses to back down. That one phone camera and one determined woman can stop an entire lie in its tracks, and that every now and then the people who think no one will stop them get exactly what they deserve.